This year we've seen a few prominent creators bear the brunt of controversies much more significant than those seen in the usual drama cycle. James Charles and David Dobrik were the most notable. However, their swift return to business as usual was quite surprising. Likewise, Minilad, who admitted to making inappropriate advances to underage fans, has returned to posting on another channel, albeit with less success than the former. However, last year we saw a very interesting situation unfold that deteriorated into a strange saga of written statements, and only recently has the person at the forefront of the controversy returned, a whole year after they were sensationally put to the fire. What's more is one of the biggest creator groups at the time was put under the spotlight because of what went on inside their creator house. Now, creator houses are a common sight online. The explosion of TikTok created more talent, which is more valuable when sold as a collective group. It's Simon Cowell's wet dream on Viagra. But unlike the mega mansion dance factories of TikTok churning out young influencers, gaming organizations are built to last. Professional organizations with esport talent on their books often have properties for these creators to train and collaborate. On the other end of the spectrum, gaming personalities usually form groups with friends and move in together to make collaboration seamless. But with that comes a delicate mix of business and personal privacy. So what happens when it all goes wrong? Enter Offline TV, a group of Twitch streamers living together focusing on solo and collaborative content, along with support staff for the group's content needs. Federico Gaetan, aka Fedmyster, was one of these support staff in late 2017, working as an editor for the group. From there, he worked his way up the ranks, taking charge of house content, and eventually becoming one of the key streamers and stakeholders in the business. That was until June 2020, when he was sensationally removed from the organisation altogether, and with it, lost his public image. Behind the scenes, his behaviour had become troubling, to the point his friends and colleagues felt like they had no other option but to publicly expose him. More importantly, Fedmyster's removal came when the Me Too movement took the games industry by storm, with over 100 people coming forward with stories about misconduct. The reaction from the industry was swift, with companies and platforms taking action against several accused individuals. Now a year on, he has returned, and obnoxious advertisements and a bumbling return to streaming have divided opinion, and the question of whether he learned anything still lingers. Did anything good come from his public rubdown, or have we just seen another massive controversy pass by without any deeper community reflection? When accountability is a justification for tabloid gossip, the fundamental principle of holding popular figures to account becomes meaningless in online discourse. So too have the stories of those affected by these figures, often overshadowed by the noise of more digestible rumour and outrage. Fedmyster's demise was tragic, not because of the irreparable damage done to his reputation, but because of what it represented.
Nobody likes hearing this kind of difficult news.
And I'm still struggling with, like, a lot of guilt. A lot of guilt.
And 6 of the girls all came out with stuff against him.
Oh, Fed's over. Stuff with Poki or OTV is like not good right now.
That just never happened to me before.
But he's being called a predator online because the way this shit was handled. And I don't think he's a predator.
You're literally building up a straw man that no one else was saying. And now you're making it seem like other people are actually saying.
If you want to say that I could have just said no, he could have just not done it.
Yes, that's right. You can now use code BWC on adamandeve.com for 50% off one item with free shipping in the US and Canada. Adam and Eve offers 24/7 support, discreet shipping, and best of all, donate 20% of their profits to the fight against HIV. Thank you to Adam and Eve for sponsoring this video, so be sure to take up this feel-good offer. Now you're satisfied under the sheets, let's take a look at what's been happening in the tweets. Yvonne Ung, better known as Yvonnie, is a member of OTV and a resident of the creator house. She was initially hired as Pokimane's assistant, then found herself in the role of house manager. She sent shockwaves throughout the streaming and gaming communities when she released a statement exposing behind-the-scenes issues within the OTV house and the behaviour of her friend, colleague and housemate, Fedmyster. On June 28, she took to Twitter with a twitlonger titled My Truth, outlining her bad experience with the popular OTV member. She explained her relationship with Fed, saying he was one of the first friends she made in the OTV house, and that they would spend time together, including late-night food runs and overnight sleepovers when watching movies.
That was something that felt very normal. It was kind of normalized as a Fed thing to do. He just would come into your room and he just chill in your bed on his phone or anything, and it felt super casual.
But this changed one night when he went too far. In December of 2018, Yvonne says Fed entered her room drunk one night while she was lying in her bed in the dark, unassuming. He lay down next to her, grabbed her hand, and kissed it after brushing it along his cheek. She didn't react out of shock and confusion. He was well aware of her relationship status as he was a good friend. She says he then stuck his hand into her sleeve, touched her side near her chest, retracted his hand, and then pretended to sleep. 10 minutes later he woke, asked how he got there, and then left her room. What happened left her very uncomfortable, and so she asked him the next day if he remembered what happened, and he said no. To avoid causing tension and discomfort within the OTV house, she dismissed it as him being intoxicated.
We'd be like watching a movie and then like he'd just fall asleep there naturally, and like, you know, nothing ever happened. It was just like a very casual, like, we're just friends. Yeah, it did feel like a very like sibling type of thing, you know?
A few weeks later, she says he entered her room drunk again. He lay down in her bed, but apologized for what he had done, admitting to overstepping boundaries. She didn't respond to him, and 10 minutes later, he did the same thing as the week before. The next day, he denied knowing what happened, leading her to question whether he was being honest. From here, she says she kept it to herself, only telling her boyfriend and a close friend of what happened. She was afraid that speaking up would cause significant issues within the OTV house, and eventually, she downplayed what had happened to her. Unknowingly, she began to distance herself from Fed, avoiding him by spending more time playing League, which would later cause issues within the creator group. She says she had brought up the incidents one day and told him how she felt, but he denied any knowledge of what happened. Even after being told about what he did to her, she says he didn't apologize. Instead, he cared more about who knew and his reputation.
I saw the way his brain, or like what his train of thought was. And if Toast knows, this person, and if this person knows who else knows. He literally said that out loud. I told him, like, Sean is not mad at you. He's really understanding. He doesn't think you're a bad person at all. He knows you were drunk, etc. Fed said that it would be in his best interest to not be upset at him. You did this to his girlfriend at the time, and like you're the one who should be asking for forgiveness.
Over time, she thought less about what happened, but Fed would sometimes trigger her when she saw him. However, to keep peace within the group, she says she kept silent and hoped he would change his behaviour. He didn't improve, and more people had issues to the point the girls within OTV and their extended friend group discussed their Fed experiences when they were together one night, be it him twisting stories to favour himself, lying about girls leading him on when they rejected him, or manipulating them to have unfavourable ideas about people or situations. They all had a story. The consensus was that Fed's behaviour was inappropriate, and there was an issue brewing that would make the dynamics of the friend group extremely volatile. Then came the stories from people within the games industry. Yvonne says her way of coping failed, and she could no longer be anywhere near Fed. So came an intervention. Those affected came together with other members of OTV and told Fed what their issues with him were.
And 6 of the girls all came out with stuff against him.
He was apologetic and understanding, but days later, she says his behaviour suggested otherwise. Shortly after Yvonne's statement, Offline TV announced Fed was removed from the group and the house, suggesting his actions had made those living there feel unsafe and uncomfortable. LilyPichu, another OTV member, was also mentioned in Yvonne's statement. She released her own twitlonger, which corroborated what Yvonne said and further explained her perspective and story. Within, she revealed an allegation against her former manager Chris Chan, which does raise concern about the integrity of OTV as a business. After explaining what happened in Taiwan with Chan, she revealed an incident shortly after her ex-boyfriend Albert Chang, or Slightly Musicals, cheated on her in November 2019. He was subsequently removed from OTV and took a very long break. One night, Lily was in her room, drunk, and Fed had asked if she wanted a massage. In her state, she agreed, and he proceeded to massage her feet to her upper thigh. She says he then left her room and came back later drunk. He laid in her bed and told her he liked her. From then, he would visit her frequently, confusing Lily because it was so soon after she was cheated on. She put him down gently, but avoided him because it made her feel uncomfortable. She says he eventually got over the rejection, but says he wanted no one to know about his advances. A theme of submission became apparent because when she learned of Yvonne's story, she was afraid to confront what happened to her in Taiwan. Faith in her friend, a desire to avoid problems, Lily ignored Fed's questionable behaviour with the girls in her friend circle. She says this led to a realisation she would often play down the importance of situations where people were hurt. Like Yvonne, the many stories of misconduct in the games industry led to her feeling compelled to share her own, and hoped others could find perspective on their own experiences due to her story. Consent, boundaries, and communication were the common themes across these statements. Although not severe, the revelation of Fed's behind-the-scenes behaviour disappointed many. He addressed the statements in a thread and was apologetic for his absence throughout the week because he was made aware of the accusations earlier in the week. He didn't deny the accusations, instead suggesting he never intended his behaviour to be malicious or predatory. He says he was flawed and has issues with himself that affect friendships, but he was not a predator. Reactions to the allegations were mixed. Some suggested that Yvonne and Lily's stories weren't worthy of being shared publicly. Some said he was just bad at flirting and was socially incompetent. Offline TV was questioned because the stories highlighted an unprofessional environment that incubated these issues. The After Hours cast discussed many of these talking points where the conflicting opinions were evident as they reacted to the allegations and Yvonne's twitlonger live.
A lot of people are trying to take this as a super Me Too sexual assault story. To me, I just see this as him being inappropriate and an asshole. This is why we're kicking him out of the house. He's a creepy asshole. That's it.
But
I don't see this as
it's written in the way that every Me Too post is, though. Man tried to make some moves, didn't really work. He stopped, and then he left, and no harm was done. I'm actually confused here.
I haven't read the whole thing in depth either, so that's kind of my
let's read the whole thing. So
take there.
Most guys, I know when a girl is interested or when she isn't, but even then I tend to ask about it, verbally get in there, get that consent, and call it a day. It doesn't have to be you sign a fucking form.
Now we're all aware this is definitely a Me Too allegation. She hurt me. She's using all the language. This is supposed to go next to all those other stories.
I think she's just saying how she felt from this guy overstepping his boundaries. I don't think she's calling this guy a rapist.
She's using all the buzzwords.
Yeah, he admitted to it as well.
I'm not saying he didn't admit to it, but he's being called a fucking predator online because the way this shit was handled. And I don't think he's a fucking predator. When you make a twitlonger like this and you post it around all these other girls telling stories about sexual assault and rape, and this one gets fucking 50,000 likes in comparison to all the other ones, that's what happens, dude. They're gonna call him a fucking predator for this. It really, this didn't need to be an outward statement like that.
I disagree. I feel like it should be an outward statement. I mean, she clearly had a negative fucking thing. I think people who make it a fucking Me Too allegation, right? I think maybe that's a case of looking too deep into it. I'm not looking at it as a Me Too allegation. So far, even though as popular as it is, I'm looking at it as a girl who just fucking had a bad experience with a guy.
What is he supposed to do? Wait, how do you minimize this situation? Genuinely, how do you fix this situation? Why is everybody in the story drunk all the time if business is being done? Why the fuck is there a guy sleeping in a girl's bed every night?
It's very unprofessional how they've dealt with it.
Either they should have said, hey, this is why you're leaving the offline TV house, blah blah blah, farewell, right away without the week in between the
I feel like they should have booted him out
boot him out right away, or if you actually want to give him a chance, give him more than a week.
At the end of the day, they're a business. They have more than just the people living in them. They have lawyers. They have all these individuals working for them. It's a big fucking operation. You just shouldn't let this fucking happen.
You can't have problematic people like that.
You literally have a brand to uphold. Stop fucking letting this shit happen.
The premise for contention was the argument regarding Fed being a predator because the delivery of the stories was similar to those of severe cases of sexual harassment. However, a closer reading of the statements would suggest otherwise.
Do people that jump to this conclusion, if they are against false accusations, not realize that they are contributing to the false accusation by saying like this?
There's so many things you could say that could have happened, but you choose to say you could have just said no.
Past allegations and some harrowing stories shared over prior weeks may have impaired the perception of what the girls were saying. Likewise, the lack of cohesion with the statements created chaos in trying to understand the key issues. From there came dissent, and with it, Lily deleted a tweet because people dismissed her feelings.
Because people were downplaying it, like it was just cuddling. I didn't say no. I just wanted to ruin careers, and that felt really, really bad. Because it's a problem I have where I minimize a lot of things, and I do it for years, and when I came public with it and people were minimizing it again, it just felt like my world was crashing down, so that's why.
Likewise, Yvonne received a similar reception.
When they were the ones who put you in that position, how can other people minimize what you went through and try to blame you when you didn't even want that in the first place?
Fellow OTV members saw this happen, particularly Pokimane, who came to the forefront of support when she went public herself, corroborating Yvonne and Lily's experiences and adding her accusations to the fire in a Twitch stream.
I won't lie, it's been a bit frustrating seeing people be so negative and rude towards them. And so I would really like to help paint a bigger picture or a better picture and help you guys understand.
She explained her relationship with Fed, saying he was one of her closest friends in OTV and that she would confide in him about her feelings of being ostracized from the friends group. However, she suggests that he was also at fault for her feeling this way because he would exclude her.
Anytime he or anyone else did try to include me, the way people treated me just felt kind of off, but ultimately I just put it on myself, or maybe me sucking and people not liking me.
Her biggest issue with Fed was when he interfered with her attempts to get to know someone she was interested in at a house party.
I texted this guy and I was like, oh, kind of sucks, like we didn't get to hang out. And he was like, yeah, you seemed really busy. And I was like, me busy? Like you and Fed were, two peas in a pod all night. And the guy informed me that Fed told him that we were together when we weren't, and that he told the guy not to tell anyone. That was the first time that Fed just massively broke my trust, and I could never trust him or look at him the same way. I retroactively asked someone else from kind of the past whether Fed had said something similar to him, and they did. And I very recently, just today, found out that he said the same thing to another guy. And the guy I found out about today was someone else that I was seeing or wanting to get to know.
For this to happen on 3 different occasions is somewhat concerning. She admits to being confrontational, which led to her confronting Fed and letting him know what he did. Her method of being upfront with her problems was frequent.
He would ignore me, and now I find out oftentimes ran around to others, making me sound crazy. At the Just Friends house, he would come over anytime things were off or tense at the offline TV house and just be in their rooms.
While he's there, he's just spreading bad vibes about OTV, which would slowly start to push us away from them.
They eventually fell into a stale friendship to avoid issues within the OTV house.
I felt a lot of pent-up resentment against him, and I also felt a lot of guilt for that pent-up resentment. Just about every girl had a Fed story. We all realized we brushed off our negative experiences in order to not disturb the social circle, to avoid issues, and because we figured they were just slip-ups. This was the moment we truly realized how big of a problem his behavior was, and that ultimately we needed to plan an intervention of sorts.
From the girls' chat and in the stories shared during the intervention, Fed drove division between Pokimane and the group by lying and constructing narratives showing her in a negative light. The revelations led to Pokimane believing that Fed was manipulating her life.
And the person that I would share how badly I wanted these friendships with was the same person that was actually isolating me and sabotaging these friendships for me.
She also alleges Fed would often take an interest in a girl within the community, lose interest, and then make disparaging comments about them to others.
The way he does it and the way he acts after he gets rejected is really problematic because it damages the girl's reputation and hurts their character. That can be really impactful on someone's career in esports or on Twitch.
This behaviour led to her talking to Yvonne about her concern about hiring a new female worker for OTV, worrying about how he would act with them working under him, saying this was before she was aware of other incidents. Fed became aware of the concern when Disguised Toast asked him about the Yvonne incident.
At this point, Toast was the only one from OTV who was aware of the incident with Yvonne and Fed, and he warned Fed about the growing concern within our friend group in regards to his behavior around girls. Fed responded by getting angry at Toast and claimed to not have remembered the incident with Yvonne, and he seemed more concerned with who else knew about the incident and about anything else, and who had said what about him. The way he shit-talked Yvonne and Lily to me and others is so frustrating knowing what happened between them. The Yvonne incident happened, he would talk to me about how Yvonne was lazy and not working enough and playing League all the time. And I was concerned, and he would say, oh, she won't work on OTV stuff with me or brainstorm and blah, blah, blah. And this discussion got to the point of us almost letting Yvonne go from the company because we thought she just wasn't interested enough in working with us. When in reality, her behavior was entirely because of the incident that happened between them two. And so it just blows my mind that he would try to manipulate the narrative in that way. I would talk to Yvonne sternly about we need to work, we need to do this, we need to do that. And I had no idea the reason she was behaving the way that she did was because she was so incredibly uncomfortable around him.
Pokimane's perspective added more depth to understanding the extent of the accusations. The revelation of Fed messing with Pokimane's relationships, linked with the circumvention of the intervention, compounded the justification of his public dismissal. Likewise, Pokimane suggesting Fed had nearly driven Yvonne out of OTV because of his comments when she was actively avoiding him was a point of concern. He needed to take a step back and work on himself, and his removal from the organization was necessary. Others who had a behind-the-scenes perspective on the situation spoke out too. Comments from the OTV leader Scarra compounded Fed's demise.
He proceeded after that day to contact the people who weren't there and kind of do exactly what we told him was the problem.
Another streamer, Yasuo, who was not a part of the OTV group or friend circle affected, but considered one of Fed's closest friends, supported Scarra's statement in his stream about Fed.
He says pretty much I'm getting kicked from offline. He's yeah, pretty much we had an intervention and they talked to me about how I made them uncomfortable and there was this one instance where I got drunk and then I touched Yvonne's shirt with my nose and I put my hand on her side. And then yeah, that's pretty much it. And then I was an idiot and I forgot about it and I lied and then He didn't tell me about the Lily situation. He told me a little bit about Pokey. He told me a little bit about the situation with him and Yvonne. He pretty much didn't tell me shit. I'm gonna be real. He downplayed the situation to me a lot. My instant reaction when one of my closest friends is telling me that, I was dude, I was yo, what the fuck? Offline TV's overreacting, bro. That's fucked up. That's not cool. And he's yeah, it is what it is and all this. And I'm yeah, that's super fucked. What the fuck, dude?
Yasuo's corroboration helped clear the air as to why the girls came forward with their stories. This intervention, often mentioned, was not well understood until the others explained what happened. He was told by those affected that his behavior was problematic. They gave him the benefit of the doubt to go and proactively reflect and work on himself, but he threw that all away. The girls only did what they thought was right. Although they could have handled it better, their stories were valid and they did start a conversation. Once people knew more information and the picture was more apparent, there was, unsurprisingly, more support. Yvonne and Lily both talked about their feelings on stream, as we've seen throughout this part. However, in the chaos of the events, one allegation from outside the OTV house went relatively unheard, and it's arguably a great indication as to why these girls spoke out. Angel's Kimmy, now known as Plushies, discussed her experience with Fed from the perspective of the Just Friends house, which often mingled with OTV.
He was like, no, come on, let's cuddle. And he's like, it's not that big of a deal, let's just cuddle. And I clearly remember saying no. I clearly remember being uncomfortable with this. I don't cuddle with my guy friends, and I never have in my life cuddled with a guy friend before. Ever.
But this was not her only experience, and what she describes next is entirely inappropriate.
This is so weird. He opened my legs and put his head on my crotch. I was wearing pants and everything, that just never happened to me before.
3 girls voiced 3 different uncomfortable experiences with Fed. There was a pattern of behaviour that went unchecked, and when allowed to recede and better himself privately, he blew it. Ultimately, it justified the manner of his dismissal, seemingly getting the message across to him. Individually, the girls' accounts may just be his mistakes, but together they paint the picture. From then, he went offline, suggesting he was taking the situation seriously and would possibly return as a better person. The next few months would pass and everything went back to normal. Fed mostly remained offline and was seemingly underway with his rehabilitation. The OTV girls were also back to streaming, and the whole ordeal had seemingly concluded. Until late November. What would ensue was an utterly pointless back and forth that didn't help anyone whatsoever and trivialized the reason as to why Fed was taking the time away from public life. This saga ignited when Destiny revealed a 25-page document had been sent to him, which was created by Fedmyster.
As a behind the memes thing, something that I've heard circulating, supposedly, Fed was working on a bomb to expose some people. We'll see if that's going to be the case here.
Titled The Truth, he outlines what he had been doing since he was exposed.
So we start off with the, I'm trying to improve myself, take me seriously, guys. I even stopped drinking, blah, blah, blah. We got those memes down. Then we've got kind of excusing our behavior. Hold on, guys. I know some of this looked weird. Listen, it wasn't meant to be sexual. I just like to be close to people, okay?
But there's a twist. Fed says others had been twisting the truth for their own benefits, and Pokimane is highlighted as the key offender, suggesting her stream in June didn't fully explain their relationship. He says some of the claims she made were false, twisted, and misconstrued, and he was going to contextualize every claim she made against him because it's important to him. After the 2018 Taiwan trip, the pair had become really close to the point of raunchy flirting, and it seemed like there was a blossoming relationship. However, in March, she basically friend-zoned him due to the fact they live and work together, and they also have a stake in the business, which is a fair enough reason. He was disappointed, but agreed. He reveals messages between the pair before the chat and months afterwards, suggesting although they had the discussion, there was still something between the pair. The initial messages include the meme, and this is when they were at the point of a relationship. However, what they show over time is the distancing of the sexual conversations to them discussing seeing other people, and then what can only be described as what you would see between close friends.
Compared to previous, like the other messages were like full on like, fuck me fam. These messages are like, oh, I'm so glad that you're in my life. Like, thank you very much. You know, like it just feels a little bit more professional.
Fed didn't see it this way, and as it would continue through the months, he started to believe he was just not good enough for her, causing him to deteriorate and often act out of character or vent to fellow streamers in the Just Friends house. The same group of streamers Pokimane says she felt distance from as a result of his woeful romantic venting.
If you've got somebody that you talk to when you have problems with your significant other, you should limit that to one person, or you should limit that to people that they'll never interact with, because those people will, without fail, don't care what you say, and I've argued with a lot of people about this, they've always been wrong. Those people will grow to hate you. It will happen. Just it's human nature. Nobody's at fault for it. It's just what'll happen.
Pokimane characterized his behavior as being manipulative, which he says is slanderous. However, he doesn't substantiate why he believes that. He offered context regarding Pokimane's sleep schedule and claimed his intentions were pure when he voiced his issues about her to other girls, but it doesn't invalidate Pokimane's opinion that he had manipulated her character. It doesn't help his case when he says she could have just taken time off to make friends, which ignores the fact the other girls said they were wary of her and that Pokimane herself indicated she felt distant from them. A lot of what's written in this manifesto reads as if Fed is the victim of Pokimane. He was led on for years, and now he is made the scapegoat for Pokimane's inability to sacrifice time to make friends. It's also confusing how he claims he may have influenced the perception of Pokimane, apologizes for it, but then claims it's outrageous. She would say his behavior was manipulative. Onto the Steve incident, he explains how Pokimane had issues with him telling others that they had a thing. He once told a roommate dubbed Josh they had a thing and Pokimane grilled him for it. He then did it again with another guy who was dubbed Steve, but contrary to what Pokimane says, he denies telling Steve to not tell Pokimane what he said, but also that he should shoot his shots. He then addressed the third occasion from her stream.
I very recently, just today, found out that he said the same thing to another guy. And the guy I found out about today was someone else that I was seeing or wanting to get to know.
He says this is not true and had only talked to this person about equipment, which doesn't make it any more clear as there are now so many possibilities of the truth based on verbal testimony with hardly any evidence to back it up. But over time, Steve and Pokimane started seeing each other and would often end up staying at each other's homes. Fed says he slept next door to Pokimane and that he would often hear what happens at night. He says this drove him to spend time out of the house, his feelings and manhood in ruins, and would occasionally end up in the just friends house. Oh, hey guys, I couldn't bear the noise of the girl I'm obsessed with doing it with her boyfriend in the next room. It's taking away my manhood. It does make you wonder what he was telling the girls just friends. Was he seeking advice, or was he making it seem like Pokimane was torturing him? But he suggests Pokimane's feeling of isolation was her own fault. The idea of emotional torture continued, as when she would find interest in other men, she would distance herself from him. Then, when she didn't, she'd give him more attention. As a result, they would have the so-called sleepovers, massages, and Pokimane would be possessive of him, with screenshots of her badmouthing a streamer named Jody.
But she's basically she's getting jealous of other girls talking affectionately about him in their stream. She's jealous about it. She's actually being controlling of him. She's actually being controlling of him. Holy shit.
So far, he argues Pokimane misrepresented their relationship in the hopes of gaining sympathy under the guise of defending Lily and Yvonne. As a result, Pokimane was now under scrutiny for emotional abuse and had questionable credibility after she described their relationship as just being close friends. However, the second half of the manifesto brought Pokimane's entire character into question.
He would talk to me about how Yvonne was lazy and not working enough and playing League all the time. And I was concerned, and he would say, oh, she won't work on OTV stuff with me or brainstorm and blah, blah, blah. And this discussion got to the point of us almost letting Yvonne go from the company because we thought she just wasn't interested enough in working with us. When in reality, her behavior was entirely because of the incident that happened between them two. And so it just blows my mind that he would try to manipulate the narrative in that way. And kind of aggressively, if that makes sense. He was really not wanting her there anymore.
Fed says he never wanted Yvonne fired, identified the time of his incident, and claims Pokimane knew about what happened between May and June of 2019, and discussions of Yvonne's removal didn't take place until 4 months later. Yvonne moved into the house as Pokimane's personal assistant, and he would often hear complaints from her that Yvonne had issues with her work ethic, a subtle hint towards him parroting those thoughts later. Yvonne supposedly told Pokimane about their incident, and Fed remembers it because he was crying in Pokimane's room trying to explain to her how he felt about what he put Yvonne through, although this contradicts what Yvonne said in a statement in June. Yvonne said Fed didn't know what he did, and that he only cared about who knew what he had done, and that he also continued to do things afterwards she said made her uncomfortable. So whether Pokimane knew the full extent of what happened was unclear, and whether he was being honest is questionable. What's more is he suggests Pokimane only brought up his chat about Yvonne's work ethic because she was trying to paint it as him trying to get Yvonne fired because of the incident. He goes on to explain how members in the house had discussed ways in which Yvonne could be motivated to benefit the team, and eventually Yvonne moved into the new house when they relocated. Then came the bomb that turned Pokimane into the ruthless, conniving villain of the story, and it was in fact she who wanted Yvonne fired. The talk of her removal came in early 2020, months after the initial discussions of her work ethic. Pokimane was concerned that Yvonne's transformation into a content creator would disrupt the operations with OTV content, and she is seen sharing her concern with others in the group. Fed claims he's using this as a defense of him wanting to see her fired. However, this entire part is completely irrelevant because, referring back to Pokimane's stream, she doesn't actually make any claim that he wanted Yvonne fired. The point she made is that his behavior and lack of recognition of what effect his actions had towards Yvonne nearly led to her dismissal because of her avoidance of him, but we'll come back to this a bit later. He thinks people were pushing misinformation and spiteful narratives against him, and Pokimane's intentions were to cover her insecurities for not putting effort into her relationships. After watching all of the streams regarding the situation, Pokimane was at the center of collecting everyone's stories about him, although he links a clip of Kimmy, who said in her stream he had been indecent towards her, something he never addressed. Pokimane created a narrative she had others twist their experiences to align with. He notes the fact she said she had resentment towards him for what happened in 2018, and suggests she had no desire to see him change because of a subtweet she posted after unfollowing him across all social media. When it comes to the intervention, he says he had called 3 people about what happened, and that the response from them is that they felt bad for him, and that one of them even said they thought it was ridiculous. He claims he never suggested this, but the reaction from these people is only a result of what he told them. Word eventually got out about these calls, and those from the intervention thought he wasn't taking their discussion seriously. He says he was drafting a statement and was on the 7th draft when he was told about Yvonne's tweet, and says his demise was the result of a bad game of telephone. Although he says it wasn't his intention, this document had a tone of him seeking vindication, which is the purpose of a document like this. However, when this was leaked, he came out with another smaller statement suggesting he never wanted this to be made public, and that the person who did so violated his trust. The reason he didn't want it public was because he had discussed the issues he had with Pokimane, and they both agreed to keep their private issues private, and once he returned, she would give a brief statement of support. He says he confided in a fan, who had spread the document to many streamers, violating his trust. The document itself was written months ago, and at the time he felt vindictive towards Pokimane because she had supposedly misrepresented him, but also says after talking to her he understands her perspective. He understands what Pokimane said regarding Yvonne. It was to highlight how his harassment had led to her lacking motivation, and subsequently almost having her fired. Then he says he and Pokimane were never intimate or in a relationship. They were very close and flirty, but nothing more, and he doesn't think she was leading him on. Something about everyone making mistakes and moving on. Please respect our privacy. The leak is a gross invasion. He regrets it was made public. Why didn't you just delete the document? Unsurprisingly, the leaker also wrote a doc themselves and explained how they helped Fed draft his document, which raises questions about whether he was being honest about not wanting the doc to be released to the public. From this document, it's clear this person is a fanatic and had no place in hearing the private issues between Fed and Pokimane. They had a clear and obvious intention, and that was to make sure Pokimane was exposed for her relationship with Fed. Fed had lost sight of his mission, and it was their objective to ensure its completion because Fed was going to take the full hit, and suggest it was Pokimane's stream that had tarnished Fed's image. But it was Fed's behaviour that had done that, and there were many statements alongside Pokimane's stream that helped compound Fed's demise. At the end of the day, this is a great advertisement for not having close online relationships with fans because they have no place knowing your private affairs. Pokimane responded to the leak very soon after, addressing it in a stream. It was an interesting decision to address the document live, as her reputation for reacting to negative works has often resulted in her coming off worse. Whereas her initial stream was a statement outlining her experience, this one had the element of her defending her credibility, something she isn't quite adept at doing. So it wasn't surprising when she raised more questions than answers after her stream because of her hesitancy to elaborate with proof of what she was trying to say. Roll the misery.
He says I lied about not knowing what happened between him and Yvonne. On my stream, I said how I was so upset. Thinking back at the times, I was worried about Yvonne's behavior and how much she was or wasn't dedicated to OTV, when in reality she was acting out a certain way because of what Fed did to her. And I think the way he interpreted it, and perhaps the way it was understood publicly also, is me pretending like I didn't know. But what I meant was that I hadn't known for so many months. I never wanted Yvonne fired. I wanted OTV to always be working and consistent. And because of that, we did have to have conversations about Yvonne's position and role within the company. Fed did complain about Yvonne to people, not just to me, and that is what I'm referring to. The Jody thing was just like an unfortunate, petty thing. I actually wasn't trying to be possessive of him at the time. Also, all of these screenshots are from like wildly different times. So if you see screenshots from like when we were talking and then when we weren't, and then from back then later on, you're gonna think that it's like a constant push and pull. All I'm saying is like, I really feel like in the grand scheme of things, it's just not that important, in my opinion. Do you guys remember what triggered this whole manifesto? This whole incident? Something completely unrelated. So again, I'm sorry, it's not that I'm trying to like intentionally be vague or pretend like I did nothing wrong. It's just like, it's just a personal situation. People keep bringing up the sleepovers. I don't know if you guys remember, but Fed slept in like everybody's room. That was like an active meme. He slept in Yvonne's room. He slept in Lily's room. He slept in all the girls' rooms. And I really dislike that you guys are trying to hold that against me when, like, he slept in all the girls' rooms. Again, even Fed knows, like, I never tried to lead him on. Like, there was just a point in time where we flirted, and there were many a point in times where we didn't. And there were a point in times where perhaps he took some of the things that I said as flirting when I didn't mean it that way.
Again, his story, my story, and the truth is probably somewhere in between.
Pokimane was forced to respond again. This time, she spent a few days writing a document, including receipts, and ending up dropping 11 more pages of Google Doc for everyone to read.
It comes out, Fed is a bit of a creeper, is manipulating people behind the scenes. People come out, big stink is made about him, he is expelled from the scene, and he is the classic bad guy. But then, a week ago, not even actually, I guess it's like 3 days ago, there is a big leak of a Fed document. In a surprising 180, a surprising turnaround, Fed basically says, most of these things about me and Pokey have been fabricated. She's actually the master manipulative queen bitch, and I'm going to reveal it all. But now we have a counter document, and it seems like all the original claims were probably truer than we originally thought. Based on some of the creative liberties taken in screenshotting some of these text messages.
For the sake of our sanity, we'll touch on the parts that actually matter. After alluding to Fed's credibility, she gets straight to the point and says he misrepresented the story regarding her wanting Yvonne to be removed from offline TV, which he had used to defend himself, and suggests he never wanted her fired. She reveals DMs much earlier than what Fed had shown in his documents, showing his complaints about Yvonne not helping him with OTV work. Pokimane also points out that he had complained to other OTV members throughout the house about Yvonne not working with him, and none of them had any idea about Yvonne's discomfort with him. Elaborating on her concerns about Yvonne becoming a content creator, she makes it clear it was a completely different issue to that of her work ethic induced by Fed's behaviour. Fed using it to suggest he meant no malice towards Yvonne was disingenuous and wasn't a good look. Moving on, she didn't offer much clarification to the confusion of their relationship, and it was a relatively weak rebuttal. However, her final part was much more damning and put into question the credibility of Fed's original claims. The conversation between him and Pokimane regarding the streamer Jody was used to suggest she was being possessive of him, which led to the belief she was tormenting him, but the messages he showed lacked some very important context. Fed said he felt exploited by Jody, and that after his shit-talking of her, Pokimane played into what he was saying and he encouraged it. Although Pokimane's own shit-talking antics were exposed in this situation, it was disingenuous of Fed to suggest this was Pokimane being jealous of Jody and being possessive of him. A big mistake.
Oh, that's gonna be a level 12 yikes from me, fam.
It's like basically editing a fucking screenshot, leaving that shit out. Why would you do that?
I wonder if he thought, because she's so private, I wonder if he thought she would never,
that she would have never leak this. Yeah, that's
maybe.
what I'm thinking.
What I found out through other people was that Fed has been sharing this document with some of his fucking fans who have been emailing this around to people. So somebody else in esports, in the industry, like contacted me and they were like, yo, dude, do you know who the fuck this guy is? And I've seen emails and messages from like a crazy fucking Fed fan who is like trying. So if Fed is sharing this document with that guy, it makes it pretty, like, for instance, could you imagine if I was in my Discord being like, hey guys, what do you think about this giant response I'm writing about how much I actually hate LilyPichu? Like, of course that doc is gonna leak. No fucking shit.
Pokimane's conclusion distanced her relationship with Fed from the reason as to why he was removed from the house, and ultimately she does have a point. For Fed to suggest his dismissal was a conspiracy based on feelings from 2 years prior was either him being desperate for a win or a greater example of his delusion. The fact of the moment was that he had been discredited, and it was the only thing he had left. Instead of recluding to the shadows and actually let the issue rest, he came out with another document. Let me give you the rundown. He reaffirms his position on the leak, and refers to the leaker's own document as evidence of this, but the fact he designed the document the way he did, it's hard to believe him with his credibility on strings. What he needed to do with this document was pull out evidence that would invalidate what Pokimane had brought to the table. Instead, he tries to suggest Pokimane victimized him in front of millions because of the way she betrayed him. He also explained how he came to trust a dedicated member of his community with the document, but if you don't want the spin, he befriended a dedicated fan and was shocked when the fan acted in the interest of their idol. Just another great example of why creators should maintain the distance with online fans. It never works out. He addresses what Pokimane brought out regarding Yvonne, and he completely missed the point being made. So I don't think he can say he understands Pokimane's thinking if he continues to think she said he wanted Yvonne fired. The issue raised was how Fed's action, his subsequent ignorance to why Yvonne was evading him, almost led to the point of Yvonne being released from the organization.
It's kind of weird to attack somebody's criticism and working with you when you've kind of been involved in like a weird, I guess like a sexual assault situation with them. Like, seems like that person's probably not going to be too keen on working with you.
He originally admitted he doesn't like confrontation, so he vents to everyone else about it instead, which paints a bad image about them.
I feel like Poki's texts here are pretty fair in terms of like, I want this person to do this job, I have these expectations, it seems like they're drifting away from them. Whereas Fed's initial texts were like, oh, I went into a room, she's playing fucking League, she just sends me a smiley face, like, are you serious?
The rest of the document is equivalent to a semantics debate, and nothing much is really given to the conversation to rebuild any of his credibility.
I think that with the initial screenshots that Fed had given us and the crops that he had given us, it looked like Poki was fucking with his head really hard, but I think after getting more context from Poki and now seeing how Fed is trying to explain the additional context, it really feels like Poki was giving a lot of signals and Fed is like intentionally ignoring a lot of it.
What really stood out, however, was that of all the documents he had supposedly made, it was only Pokimane's that was leaked, someone who had been at the forefront of ridicule for her relationships that year. However, by the end of the saga, most people had grown tired of the intricacies of Pokimane's private life.
Fuck, this drama is really boring to me now, I'm sorry.
And the supposed twist in the story seemingly dissipated. Fedmyster's perception of his dismissal was, however, concerning, and although he supposedly wrote the document as therapy, his further engagement in the situation looked desperate. I don't think Pokimane would invest as much time as he claims into trying to orchestrate his downfall. The most likely scenario is that she was corroborating stories to be accurate. Regardless, his actions and behaviour were what got him into the predicament he was in, and his road to recovery had taken a massive detour. YouTube returns come one in many and for various reasons. However, returns from controversy are seemingly touch and go depending on who you are and what you did. As we saw last time with James Charles, it was only 3 months of internet purgatory until he returned to public life, albeit with a notable dent in viewership, probably because of how nonchalant his return video was. The LA side of YouTube itself is an example of how easy some have it in returning. Jeffree Star got Anakin Skywalker some kids and returned as if nothing happened after a brief non-apology video. David Dobrik set the pace, returning 2 months after it was alleged a girl was raped whilst filming one of his vlogs, among other things. The gaming community, on the other hand, has seen very interesting examples of returns that begs the question, how and why, with Minilad being a good example. But so too was Red Kiwis, who was only recently brought to the sword by the internet. Even Lionmaker thought it would be wise to return, eventually being removed because he is a genuine danger to society. Fed's return, however, was different, to say the least.
It's true. I was lost. I lost sight of my principles. I lost my sense of boundaries, my ability to harbor compassion and consideration. I was blinded by my own doing and hurt some of the people I've come to care about the most. To anyone I truly hurt, I just want to once and for all say, I'm sorry. In the end, I could hardly recognize myself. And then it was like a light switch went off. And there I was in this infinite, self-inflicted pit of isolation, depression, and pain. The pain I've caused others, the pain of loss, the pain of disappointment and regret. This sort of mental state continued for months. Time felt slow. I didn't want to do anything or be anything. Existing felt pointless and continuously agonizing. I was stuck in this loop, feeling constant shame and unable to forgive myself. You know, for so long I was trying to subconsciously run away from the reality of my situation with food, games, shows, even traveling. Traveling with the few people left who still believed in me.
Hey.
Hey, Rico?
Yeah.
Wait, what the fuck? Are you like canceled?
Wait, what the fuck?
If you told me he was returning from accusations of sexual harassment and manipulative behaviour, I don't think I'd believe you. He apologises for the pain he caused others, but focuses on the pain he caused himself, which was only because he was outed for what he had done. But what am I to judge? It's a 7-minute long video, so maybe he will show us how he has improved himself and understood why him being exposed matters.
So I joined a mindfulness meditation group and started my spiritual enlightenment journey. I started running, hiking, cycling, mountain biking, you name it, I was probably doing it. Then the gyms opened up and I won't lie, I pretty much started going in every day. Every day I hustled. Then I got a dog.
Maybe not. Returning from controversy is not a simple task. Many have failed. However, that creates a large enough sample size to gauge what makes a decent apology or return video. For example, Logan Paul's video 3 weeks after his universally discussed controversy is a good benchmark for what is required. Logan's video was balanced. It included a positive message, but also showed that he had taken the issues he mocked seriously and used his platform to not only raise awareness, but educate his audience. The fact he was able to return so soon after is probably down to the fact he hit all the marks with this video, and maybe because his viewer base didn't understand what he did wrong in the first place. Although he may have had outside direction of what to do and was more than likely strategized by a PR team, he still did something. Fed, however, produced what can only be described as a self-aggrandizing advertisement for his return to Twitch streaming. He fleetingly mentions hurting people, however doesn't identify how he hurt them, nor how he's improved his understanding of why he did. Instead, he said he had improved himself through working out, meditating, and getting a dog, all the while traveling in the name of self-discovery. He says he learned how he thinks, however, not only does he not explore the issues he was criticized for and admitted to, the only growth he has shown is in his physique. He also shows how little affected he was, and that even after a year of not working, he was able to maintain a lifestyle where he could go out, consistently exercise, and give attention to his dog all the time. So it appears that he took a year-long vacation, more than a year of reflection. I also find it very interesting how similar his video is to that of Albert or Slightly Musicals, who was literally cancelled for cheating on Lily. This is coincidentally what Fed was accused and admitted to of capitalizing on a fortnight after the scandal. When you compare the two videos, the similarities are so apparent.
I also started exercising consistently, gained, and I needed that. A goal that whether I reach it is entirely up to me. I began looking into adopting a dog. So many cute dogs.
Unfortunately for Fed, the reason he was ousted was arguably more serious than what Albert had done. Although cheating on Lily was awful, what he did does not reflect on the consequences he faced. So Albert could get away with a video that shows what he had been doing and how he had been self-improving, but Fed needed to show why he knows what he did was wrong, and he didn't. This was further emphasized when he returned to streaming.
It's acknowledgement and accountability. You guys have all read Yvonne's thing a year ago. It was behavior that I didn't get her explicit consent from. This qualifies as sexual assault, and I'm gonna go on record and say that, as hard as it is to say, but it's the truth. The thing I want to talk about is Lily, and if those of you that don't know, she was dealing with personal issues with her breakup, and I'd been taking care of her and hanging out with her. She was in a very dark place, so I wanted to be around her to make sure she was okay. This is someone that meant the world to me, so her happiness was important to me. As I'm hanging out with her so much, there was this sense of intimacy that started to grow, and it started to grow with when you hang out with someone so much, and there was a time when I was in her room and I asked hey, can I give you a foot rub? And she was like, okay. And she said yes, but we were tipsy, and in the moment it felt real and honest for me to say I kind of like you. But when I woke up the next morning, it was oh shit, I did not mean that. And I can totally see how it looks like I was trying to take advantage of her emotional state, but the truth is that was not my intention at all. I needed to acknowledge the shit I've done. The Poki thing that was recent, the whole Google Doc shit, Jesus Christ, that whole trilogy, good Lord. I'm just gonna go out and say that document should have never been created. I was in a very angry and really bad place. It was a complete breach of privacy to even think about putting, sensitive information like that on a document. And then sharing it with people was just like the complete wrong thing to do.
His return was very divisive, and in looking for the full VOD, it was clear there were issues in how he spoke and what he did, but also in how people perceived what he was saying. There's a lack of clarity, and the fact he didn't keep the stream archived possibly led to uncertainty about his growth. It's very clear he didn't have any support behind the scenes, and if so, they are more than likely just his close friends. From a PR perspective, leading with the disaster of a return video and fumbling your way through the recount of your actions is not the best way to get the public back on side. However, he did acknowledge the issues he had perpetuated.
So I put a lot of thought into this, and what I want to do is I want to bring, or I plan to use my platform to bring more awareness to topics related to women. Okay? For example, dedicated streams, where I bring on guests, female speakers, female streamers who are comfortable talking about, consent and misogyny, shit like that.
People responded saying this was cringe, but the advocacy of women's issues isn't cringe. It's the way he's promoting it that seems insincere and comes off rather forced. Platforming voices you have suppressed and affected is a good step in the right direction, as is educating those around you and yourself. But this is a pledge for the future, rather than taking accountability, as he frequently says he's doing in this stream. Learn, grow, change is the ethos from my old high school, and if he's committed to learning now, then that's fair. However, he can't say he's grown and changed if he's only just started. Maybe in the future we can look back and see if he does fulfill his pledge, and if he doesn't, well then we can feel justified in questioning his return. As for whether he was held accountable, the way in which Fedmyster was removed from OTV and its timing led to a great deal of skepticism towards both Lily and Yvonne's stories, with many people dismissing them as being less serious than others. Intense public scrutiny led to fellow OTV members and other friends coming forward to show support. The corroboration of OTV members and their friends justified Yvonne's decision. Not every situation will be about criminal offences, and reacting to these situations of misconduct with that mindset completely missed the point of why the girls told their stories. Fed's behaviour was unacceptable and needed correcting. His attitude after the intervention concerned the group, so the reason for his dismissal needed to be known. He might not be a bad person, but it was clear there was an issue, and forced reflection is arguably what was needed. It was up to him to make a change, and whether he did was questionable. As we discussed, his return saw him taking accountability now, which undermines the whole reason why he was publicly exposed in the first place. He was put on the spot to be held accountable, but also for him to hold himself accountable, which he didn't with his initial statements. Then when he blamed Pokimane for his demise, it ignored the fact he caused many problems among others, and that in doing so, delegitimized their stories in favor of himself. This is shown in his return video. It was self-centered and about a perceived personal growth, but could you really say that he really learned? His stream raised that question, but if we're going to analyze the overall situation in terms of accountability, we need to understand why it matters. What we saw was a mess. In retrospect, we can always criticize based on the actions of others from a specific point in time, and the sequence of events couldn't have been handled in such an incohesive and destructive way. The greatest theme was communication. In terms of understanding what was happening, you needed to watch multiple streams, read multiple statements, and search Reddit for poorly contextualized clips. But the reaction was justified. There was a positive message, and it expanded the understanding of what is inappropriate and why it's important to communicate with each other. However, as there's always another side, and the institutional issues were very much untouched, as guilty as Fedmyster is in his behaviour, the systemic problems within gaming culture and the failure of OTV as a business to protect its employees are very apparent. But that's just it. The trend we've seen now over the past few videos is how easy it is to put a face to a problem, but how much harder it is to root out the overarching issues that enable this to happen. It's tragic, but it's how we learn.
All you gotta do is open OBS and click that start streaming button. People only remember your last 3 streams.
Looking back at the entire ordeal is fascinating. For something with such impact, the original story was forgotten by the time the document saga unfolded. The back and forth between Fed and Pokimane seemingly burnt out those who cared, as the Pokimane hate train was derailed with receipts. It was only until Fed released his return video that people reflected on the situation and thought his behaviour and the other stories that came out justified his demise. That being said, if Yvonne, Lily and the others are willing to give him a chance, then no one can really stop him from getting back to work. However, unlike a certain few, if he does do something like this again, then he probably won't be able to return. So to avoid anything like this in the future, just be decent, respect boundaries, tell people how you feel, and be honest. It's not hard. I've been BWC, thank you for watching, goodbye.